All right, so we are following the latest fallout from campus protests here in the U.S. over the war in Gaza. Overnight, there was another crackdown as police cleared an occupied library at Oregon's Portland State University. New video shows damage inside the building, including graffiti. Well, according to the Associated Press, more than 2,000 people have been arrested at college protests across the U.S. since April 18th. And CBS News correspondent Jonathan Vigliotti is at the University of California, Los Angeles campus with the latest there for us. Looks like things are cleaned up behind you. What is the situation like at UCLA?
Yeah, good morning to you, Anne-Maria. As you can see behind me, things are cleared up. The protesters have been removed. Things are quiet here this morning. The protesters were removed yesterday morning. Their encampment was dismantled yesterday afternoon, and overnight we saw no new protesters materialize here. This morning, there have been police officers, an LAPD presence here on site. It's hard to believe as you look at the scene behind me that just 24 hours ago, there was an at times violent, hours-long standoff between protesters and police officers. About 1,000 pro-Palestinian protesters had been gathered here. Many had been here camping out for nearly a week when early yesterday morning, the campus here declared it an unlawful gathering. And so you saw hundreds of police officers move in to break up that encampment using flash bombs to get rid of and disperse the crowd. In the end of the day, 210 arrests were made. Many of them were students and in some cases professors that we spoke with, and many drawing issue with the response. There are calls this morning now for the chancellor to step down after making the decision to bring in law enforcement, which they believe ultimately turned a peaceful protest into a chaotic one.
Well, as you know, Jonathan, the president gave formal remarks on this just yesterday for the first time. I'm curious about whether or not you've spoken to people there on campus, how they feel about what they heard.
I have, and protesters appreciated when President Biden said violence is not protected, but they believe that he was speaking in broad strokes that did not apply to the protest here. One professor, a professor of political science that I spoke with, he was arrested, taken to jail. We spoke with him just after he was released. He described the protest as peaceful and drew issue with the response yesterday compared to a response that took place here on campus 2 days earlier, where you saw violent counter-protesters come in, described as a mob, throwing projectiles into the encampment. The police were here on site, but waited several hours before taking action. When they did, they dispersed the crowd, but there were no arrests made, even though 15 people were injured. That professor is saying that in that case, it seemed like violence was protected, and he told us that he believed peaceful protesting in the case of yesterday was not.
Well, that's really interesting. Well, let's talk about, I think, what happened in Portland based maybe what the president's talking about. Several people were arrested in Portland. They cleaned out a library. The library had been vandalized. What can you tell us about what happened at Portland State University?
I think it really highlights the issue that campuses are facing across the country, struggling to support free speech while protecting students and staff. From what we know last night, a number of students, it's unclear just how many, including other protesters possibly, were inside a library that they had occupied. The decision was made by the university for police to move in and disband that occupation, which is exactly what took place. There were moments of violence there, and at least 12 people were arrested. Their exact identities, if they were students, if they were agitators, that is unclear. We also don't know if there were any injuries during the disbanding of that occupation of the library.
All right, Jonathan, thank you.